Roadman, we have a treat in store today. We have two-time Olympic gold medalist Alistair Brownlee on the podcast. But this is an interview that's slightly different. Today, I put the hypothetical question to Alistair. What did he wish he knew at the start of his journey? What lessons did he learn along that majestic career of his, defining him as one of the greatest triathletes of all time? What did he wish he knew at the outset? Take these lessons, they were hard learned, and apply them to your training, whether it's cycling, running, or swimming. Welcome to the Roadman podcast, the GOAT, Alistair Brownlee. Alistair Brownlee, welcome to the Roadman podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining me. Long overdue.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Benefit of hindsight, sitting down on a sunny Yorkshire day with a coffee in your hand. What do you think is the biggest mistake you made in the early years of your career?
Well, we're going straight for it here this
We're
morning,
going straight
aren't we?
in.
Yeah.
No
This
kids,
is
no foreplay.
heavy stuff. Yeah, heavy stuff for a Monday morning. I'll kind of caveat this by saying, you know, I'm very aware. I feel like I'm so happy with what I achieved in my career, and I feel like, you know, if I changed anything, winning those two gold medals might not have happened. So, you know, you've got to be a bit careful with tempting history and changing history, that kind of thing. But of course, there's loads of things that I could have changed and could have done differently. You know, I really became a professional athlete as an 18-year-old. As an 18-year-old, I had no idea if I was going to be any good or if I could really make a career out of being a professional sports person. So I think it probably would have been nice to go back and give myself a tap on the shoulder and say, yeah, you can do this, you will do this. You know, don't worry about those stressful decisions because it will all turn out well. But then, you know, if I'd done that, I might have not had that drive and the work ethic that I did. And I think for me, making the decision basically to kind of step away from studying and focus purely on my sport was really powerful in itself, because you know, I was going out every day thinking I could have been doing something different. I owe it to myself to do my sport to the best of my ability, which is train hard, work hard, recover well, all those kind of things. So yeah, it would be tempting fate. And of course, there's loads of training things, you know, looking back at it, I could have done differently, whether that is fueling better and more effectively in training and out of training. You know, I definitely remember thinking as for example, as maybe a 20-year-old, and people probably can dig up old school interviews, that I mean, ultimately, it didn't matter what I was eating at all. I basically, your body breaks it down to fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and by the time it gets to your intestine, it's all the same, whether that's fish and chips or Fray Bentos pie or, you know, something perfectly healthy. And yeah, when I moved into my house as I think a 21-year-old, I lived within 100 meters of a fish and chip shop, a curry shop, a pub, and a bakery.
Nice.
And yeah, I didn't do an awful lot of cooking in that house, so you can probably work out what my diet was like.
But like, we're roughly the same vintage, and it's hard for our athletes coming through to maybe appreciate how much it's changed in the last 10 years. Like, from, you know, nutrition's one of the obvious areas, but I remember going out at the start, nobody would really give you sessions. Like, you'd chat with old pros and they might tell you a session, but you didn't have access to just, you know, YouTube, the plethora of information, sports science articles like you do now. I used to do my training rides with no food and no water in my first year, because my rationale was, when I get into races, if I have the food and the water, it'll be like supercharging me.
Yeah, I mean, I was the same to an extent. You've got to really remember, I mean, massive differences. Power meters didn't really exist, and only probably became kind of mainstream in the probably only 10 years ago. So most of my career was at power meter. Like running, for example, GPS watches. So you'd go running, and you had no way of tracking how far or how fast you're going. When I started using GPS watches, I was amazed about how short all my runs were, to be honest. And yeah, I think your point of yeah, people didn't set sessions. So, you know, I remember going on. I went on some Team Sky training camps, and whatever year, 2013, 14. And I started learning about bike sessions, and really until that, I mean, occasionally run sessions have always been very structured. So, you do like whatever, 5 by 5 minutes or something. But I didn't really apply that to riding on the bike and at different power zones and this and that. If I was going to do a session, I'd either do the local chain gang, or I had a session I developed. I'd do kind of hill reps, or go out and do a route and ride all the uphills hard. I had a vague kind of idea that I was either trying to train this zone or that zone for this adaptation or that adaptation. So I'd do things at different lengths. But yeah, that change has been enormous. And in terms of nutrition, yeah, maybe I wasn't quite that extreme, but I always, yeah, I believed in, or not believed in, I mean, I'd never ever take nutrition with me on a bike ride apart from water.
Just stop at the calf.
Just stop at the calf for some
Same.
cake and tea. Yeah.
That was vintage Team Sky though. I trained with a couple of guys on the team, and it was like 2 hour ride, stop after an hour. 6 hour ride, stop after 3 hours. It's just like midway, stop at the calf for a refuel.
Yeah.
But we kind of are in an era now where everyone is about the adaptation. It's not really about training just to train. It's about training to get faster. Well, in that respect, swimming has been kind of funny because swimming for a long time, and still is in some camps, just off splits. So it doesn't matter if you're on a bad day, you wake up, heart rate variability is screwed, and you're in an absolute pit of fatigue on your Whoop recovery score. You're still swimming to those splits. And if the splits on one day versus the splits on the other day could be putting you in two totally different zones, two totally different adaptations, two totally different recovery times off the back of it.
In theory, yeah. I mean, we're going deep into training philosophy here. I mean, one thing is, yeah, does your Whoop score actually is it a good enough metric to say how well you're going to adapt for that day or not, and how fatigued you are? I mean,
I
the
don't think
two
so.
questions. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but that that's a question. You then have to say, well, actually, how big are those particular zones? Say I want to go and train my threshold. You've got to firstly ask, do I accurately know what my threshold is? You've got a second, if you got to then ask, what's the best way to train that threshold? Is it by swimming, cycling, or running about at that threshold? And in terms of intensity, how am I describing that? How have I analysed it? And how big is that threshold? I mean, I'm not convinced, to be honest, that our bodies are so specific. We need to be within a small amount of time to train to train that to the best of its ability. And at any one time, all parts of our metabolism are working, and we're training all of them all the time. And by training an hour at thresholds, you're ultimately sacrificing your ability to train whatever that number is, 20 minutes of VO2 or 5 hours at zone one. And how do you know which one of those on that day is going to have the biggest impact to improve your threshold on the race day in 3 weeks' time? And how do you know that improving your threshold for the race day in 3 weeks' time is going to lead to a better result? I mean, I'm just saying there's a load of unknowns there, and I also don't think our body is that specific. So yeah, but I do think swimming, my philosophy for swimming was that I have a set bunch of times that correspond about to those zones that with zones that we talk about, and I would probably intentionally underdo them so that on my bad day I could still do it and it would feel pretty hard, and on my
Okay.
good day I'd hit those times and it'd be pretty tough. So
So you're
all
bottom
my
on top of the zone rather than a threshold session becoming a VO2 max session if you're on a bad day.
Yeah, exactly. And it might creep up into VO2 max at the back end of the session. If I was having a really good day, I'd probably stay sub threshold, and it didn't really matter. But the real yeah, I was looking for the physiological adaptation, I guess, which is probably a bit more general. Although I don't believe the body is that specific. And even if it is, I don't believe staying at exactly that is necessarily the best way to improve your threshold. But for swimming, for example, I had one real goal in my swimming, and that was, how do I come out the water in a race in about fifth position as easily as possible? So I was never trying to train to be the fastest I could be. I was trying to train to be the most efficient I could be. And so that's why splits were super important. I mean, I'd go to the pool. My threshold was about 70 seconds for 100 meters. All I was ever trying to do in those sessions was, how easy can I swim 70 seconds per 100
Yeah.
meters? All about efficiency.
And we did go through a phase, especially like you alluded to, when the power meter went from not existent to widespread prevalence, where everyone looked at zones like they were stepping off the edge of a cliff. Like if you were doing a zone two ride and you went 2 watts above your zone two into zone three, everyone's like, oh, I'm getting a totally different adaptation. So you had lads riding uphill like a 15k an hour and riding down the far side of the hill at 85k an hour trying to stay in zone two. And you're like, what is going on here? The body can't be that detail orientated that we can tell the difference in 5 watts.
No, yeah, I don't think so. I think, yeah, and I think especially like zone two, if you're using like that kind of 5 zone model, there's also way more risk. I mean, no one say your zone, the top of your zone two is like 300 watts for sake of argument. I'm definitely not. You don't get way more adaptation from riding at 295 watts that you do at 280 or
Yeah.
probably even 250 or 220, to be honest. But the risk of actually being really high and the fatigue element of being really high in that zone is way more. And so a lot, when I'm kind of trying to talk to athletes and help people, I'm just saying you actually don't even really need to know where the top of that zone two is. You just need to know that you're way below it. But I mean, or below it. That's the important thing. And you stay below it because, if for sure, if you're riding, where you are or where I am in Yorkshire, it's very easy to all of a sudden ride every 1 minute to 3 minute hills where you're going a little bit hard. And then if that aggregates over time and you do 50 or 100 of those in a ride, all of a sudden you've got a lot of time in a completely different zone, and that's a different stimulus. But more importantly, I think it's very fatiguing. And it's all a dose response relationship in terms of how much time can I accumulate. And if you're accumulating loads of time up there, you're fatiguing and you can't accumulate time in other zones when you need it. So I think there's a kind of a general thing that's very important, but I think the specifics of it, we sometimes worry about too much.
It's interesting you talked about, and you prefaced all this advice at the very start with, if I had done stuff differently, I'm not sure if I had the results that I did have in my career. It's almost like these split timeline moments. Because, you rode to the calf, if you're doing a 6 hour ride, you rode to the calf 8 after 3 hours, rode home. The theory being that if you had a fueled better at 120, 140 grams of carbohydrates per hour, you will get an adaptation that's X% greater because the stimulus is X% greater that you can put out during the session. But there's so much of that unknowns that we don't know, like what's going on with the gut microbiome when you're fueling for a decade at 120, 140 grams an hour. So I love that saying, it's not what we know, it's not what we don't know that hurts us, it's what we know for sure that just isn't so. And that's what it feels like with fueling at the moment, where it's like everybody is on this high carbohydrate train, but we haven't seen this long-term data on what's to use a economics word, the externalities, the unintended consequences of this.
But yeah, I mean, that's the key, isn't it? We don't know what we don't know ultimately. And yeah, I guess we'll see it. I mean, there is no doubt that if you want to do more work, I mean, let's go back a step. I mean, there is no doubt that that it's exercise training is a dose response relationship. The more of it you do, the better you adapt to it, until you get to some kind of tipping point. You can increase that tipping point by fueling effectively. You can do more work and adapt to it better to get fitter, faster, stronger. I mean, I think that probably summarizes most of sports science knowledge in about a sentence. And so effective fueling allows you to do more work to train, and then obviously allows you to race longer, faster, harder. And that there's no doubt that fueling kind of effectiveness of going from basically have a gel when you feel like it, probably 20 years ago, to everyone needs about 60 grams in an hour, to everyone probably can, we can push that envelope up to 90 or even 120. There's no doubt that allows people to do more work. I think there's 2 points there. I think one is, do we know the long-term consequences of that? I mean, the answer to that is obviously no. Will we ever know that? Maybe not. But I think in general, anything that allows people to do more exercise with less fatigue is probably a good thing. If we look at it as a kind of global holistic system, and even if there are unintended consequences there, that I would have thought they're probably outweighed by the positives of allowing people to do more activity.
Yeah, there's also some other positives
Uh,
thrown in there, which I've chatted
yeah,
to sports physiologists around increased immune function by having adequate carbohydrates as well, which is
yeah,
interesting.
bone
Joe would have
health,
never thought of.
tissue health,
Yeah,
all that, all the hormonal balance. I think there's relatively good evidence to suggest that running yourself into the ground, hitting the old carbohydrate bunk consistently probably isn't great for you. I mean, like a lot of things, it's probably very good sometimes, but isn't great a lot of the time. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, if we talk specifically about carb fueling, people pushing it up to some of the crazy numbers you hear about, to 160, 180 grams an hour, which there's zero evidence for from a kind of literature point of view so far. But seems to be some anecdotal evidence. We'll see what what happens in the kind of long run, whether people are actually metabolizing that amount of carbs or not.
every year carb recommendation intake goes up, cranks get shorter. It's just the way it goes. It's just the trend we're in at the moment. We're going to
Yeah,
be
well,
on
it's
125
cyclical.
mil cranks.
I disagree. I think we're we're close, if not we've hit the zenith on that, and it's going to start going back down again. That's my prediction.
Everyone loves this nature nurture debate, and you and your brother are obviously so well positioned to observe this because were you both successful, some of the greatest triathletes of all time, because you inherited these amazing genetics from your parents, or because I struggle and a lot of us struggle to have a training partner that pushes me every single day of the week. I struggle to get someone that'll go out the door all the time, but you had two yous on the same journey, motivating, pushing you. How important do you think that support structure was, even broader than just you and your brother, in terms of building that structure of, massage therapists, physiotherapists, coaches, advisors, mentors around you guys?
Very, very important. And yeah, our nature nurture argument isn't any good with us two because obviously we had the same nature and the same nurture. But yeah, even before actually all of that, if there's one thing that people ask, what did your parents do? And they were never pushy parents. There was just all this philosophy of it doesn't really matter what you do, just do it really well, do it to the best of your ability, work hard, be determined, and kind of anything is possible. And obviously that was so important to both of us. So yeah, so there's that. There's the kind of the environment, being the nurture environment that our parents created. There's then the support of with each other. Like exactly as you said, the being able to push each other in training, being able to go out in the rain, being able to travel around the world together as young people and support each other. Being on the start line of the Olympic Games next to each other and have a joke. I mean, all of that was important. And then, yes, sharing some of the amazing people that we had around us that started off with teachers at school and then early coaches we met in Leeds, great friends to go riding and running with, and great local groups, that structure. And I really mean the wider structure. Quite often in elite sport, you talk about coaches and physiologists and stuff, which is important, but it's no more important than your training partners, the groups that you train with, other people in your life that help you.
Yeah, it's like that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I think the same's for an athlete. It takes a village to create a champion.
More city, I think.
And you and your brother did create maybe the most viral triathlon clip of all time where you're
Yeah.
helping your brother across the line. Like, can you remember that well? Does it look like when you're watching it, you're watching someone else now? Or does it still feel real?
Uh, I can't believe you said maybe the most viral try is definitely the most viral triathlon clip, obviously. Yeah, and you also said you were going to try and ask me questions that hadn't been asked before, and I've been asked that
Have you not asked a million times? Yeah, well, I was thinking the most viral one has the potential to be Yuri Kurelin missing like 15 hand ups in a
Oh
row for
yeah,
the
yeah,
balls.
yeah,
That's like
yeah.
absolute
That did
gold.
get big, to be fair. That was good. And the best thing about that was the story behind that one was I told the organizer, I said, if you put the aid stations there, this is a really hot race. Um, don't put the aid station there on a fast bit of road just after a corner. That's a terrible idea. And then they said, oh, no, it's the only place we can put it. We can't put it on in the uphills. I was like, okay. I said, right, the women's race is first. If they have a problem picking up the bottles, move it. Anyway, they still wouldn't move. So yeah, and it was good validation.
And it
But
made
yeah,
just brilliant clip as well because
yeah, it
you
did.
got the little split screens with like, Poggy or Vanderpool taking bottles at like 65k an hour, reaching across people, grabbing feed bags. You have poor Yuri taking 10 bottles in a row, missing them all.
Roadman, whether you're a weekend warrior or a world tour rider, the right tools can make all the difference. Enter 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter, the latest innovation from 4i, designed to help you reach peak performance. The Precision 3 Plus Power Meter is a compact yet powerful unit. It weighs just 9 grams and it's packed with features that set it apart, including integration with Apple's Find My network, giving you the peace of mind by letting you track your power meter wherever it is. Plus, you've got up to 800 hours of battery life. We all know that accuracy is key, and 4i's delivers a groundbreaking plus or minus 1% accuracy thanks to their unique 3D strain gauge technology. For those seeking even more data, the Precision 3 Plus Pro Power Meter offers dual-sided power meter metrics, giving you detailed insights into pedaling efficiency, torque effectiveness, and left-right balance. 4i's offers versatile product options to suit your needs. Choose from ride-ready power meters with pre-installed units on Shimano cranks, or up for factory-installed power meter where you send in your crankset for a custom installation. Ready to elevate your cycling game? Trust 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter. Precision, performance, and peace of mind all in one. Learn more by visiting 4iiii.com. That's 4iiii.com. I'm going to put that in the description down below.
In Yuri's defense, doing it in the humidity with wet bottles on a TT bike is pretty tough.
I've had him on the pod as well. We had a good laugh about it.
Yeah, it's good. But yeah, Mexico. I mean, yeah, I can kind of remember it. Also, I just came around a corner super quick, saw Jonny stumbling, grabbed him, started pulling him towards the finish line, and then somewhere down that road, I thought, oh, flipping hell, this is much further than I thought. And then I looked behind because I started thinking, wait a minute, if I can get Jonny to the finish line here, maybe he could still, be in a shot with a world title. We just need to not get caught. So I start looking behind and thinking, come on, let's not get caught. Anyway, get him to the finish line, push him over, and the rest is history, as they say.
Was it all these special moments with your brother, or is it like any sibling relationship where you swinging punches at each other at times?
No, we definitely had our ups and downs and falling out. We were training hard together. We were pushing each other on. We were in any kind of competitive relationships, there's times where, you fall out, but we were always pretty good at stepping away from it and then, coming back the next day and being friends.
And your parents, did they, like, I guess there's a point where it's obvious that the decision is right in hindsight, looking back on, it was amazing, the decision not to go to college, not to pursue a career. But at the time, it's super risky to have two of their sons. I'm not sure if you have another brother as well, but two of the sons going into a very uncertain profession. It must put a little bit of pressure and stress on them.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think our, we literally didn't, talk about what was different. We had no idea whether being professional triathletes was possible, actually, whether you could actually earn a living out of being a professional athlete.
Do people actually make money then?
Well, I don't know. I didn't know. So, it was kind of very much stepping away to do something. I had the kind of idealistic vision of really wanting to go to the Olympic Games. Ultimately, it was really tough for my parents because they were, you're stepping away from being able to do very respectable, normal careers and studying for good degrees to be an athlete. And I think it was difficult for them. But ultimately, my dad did say, you've got to follow your dreams and go and crack on, and that's what we've got to do. So they were very supportive without being pushy at all.
No, it's brilliant. You're super lucky to grow up in that environment. Yeah. Triathletes, I'm just fascinated by their ability to multitask, to prioritize what needs to be done next. Because obviously you have the three sports, but I did Navy SEAL on the podcast more than a few months ago now, but one of the things he talked about was admin, and he talked about admin as everything before the battle, getting ready for battle. It's maintenance of kit. It's, getting food ready. It's battle preparedness, and all of it isn't sexy. What do you know about that balancing both the scheduling of the sessions and the admin around the sessions now that you didn't get right at the start of your career?
Yeah, I'd say at the start of my career, it's a sliding scale of, are you prioritizing just getting the sessions done, as opposed to the kind of preparedness for the sessions and racing. And by that, I mean everything, like having the right kit, knowing about the course, being prepared for the conditions, all of that. And definitely at the start of my career, I was like 99% do all the training, smash the training, be the fittest as you possibly can be, train 35 to 40 hours a week for 8 weeks beforehand, and turn up for the race, and every the 1% will look after itself.
Yeah.
I definitely slide it, and it definitely makes a difference as doing long distance triathlon, because there's more of that admin, as it were. I slided this way down that scale, actually, as I could do less training, and I had to try and be more prepared, and there was more to prepare for. But yeah, I mean, it's a balance, and who knows, the balance is somewhere in the middle. I think one of the key things actually in endurance sport is not getting distracted by the 1%ers. I mean, yeah, your wax chain or something does definitely make a difference. But it's not worth missing hours and hours of training, to get that difference. So kind of don't be distracted by the minutiae sometimes, and get on and make sure you fundamentally do the training, because they're the massive metaphorical boulders. They're 95% of it, and then the rest of it is the small stuff.
But isn't that a hard line to tread? Because you're looking at where's the law of diminishing marginal returns with training. And if I take, 4 hours off my training this week, and I plug that, a half an hour of that goes into playing around on my best bike split where I nail my pacing for it. Another half an hour of it goes into the wax chain, another half an hour of it. You might cumulatively end up a lot faster on the day by peeling back the train a little bit. So how do you have that EQ around knowing when enough is enough with the training and it's time to press the admin throttle a bit harder?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Also, the answer is you try and do everything, and you explode. Exactly, you do all the training you possibly can, and then try and do those little bits around it, and have help to do, delegate, get people to do other people to do what they can to help you on those little bits. But yeah, it's ultimately, it's like everything in life. There's some kind of economic trade-off to say, am I better off putting my energy at this moment in time into A, or am I better off putting it into B? And I guess triathlon is a problem like that, because you're not only trying to do it across the three sports. Today, am I better off having a bit more of a focus on a swim than a bike, for example? Will that ultimately lead to a better performance in 3 months' time? As you say, or are you better off on the admin side in terms of kit, equipment, preparing for the event, making sure your travel is seamless, whatever all those admin tasks might be. How do you even prioritize each one of those? Should you prioritize to make the travel as seamless as possible, or should you be worried about practicing catching bottles? I mean, maybe I should have spent more time catching bottles, and I would have caught more and been able to drink more water, and that would have been more effective. So
I think especially for long distance triathlon, you could make a good argument with the way tech is moving that you should be peeling away at least a couple of % of your weekly training hours to look at your aero in a sport that's, coefficient of frontal drag versus power rather than weight versus power. It seems like even with some of my friends who are top triathletes, that understanding of how to manipulate coefficient of frontal drag still could come a long, long way.
Yeah, and I mean, it is that simple, right? I mean, we all know that to stick 10 watts on your threshold is incredibly difficult. To take the corresponding amount off your aero, in theory, is less, and you should prioritize. At least that's quite a easy equation to come up with. I mean, because the stats exist.
Yeah.
You could probably work out how many extra hours of training, if you wanted to, it would take to put 10 watts on your threshold.
Yeah,
or at least
a
have a
lot.
ballpark idea, and it'd be a lot. Yeah, and yeah, you can work out exactly what you need to do to take 10 watts off from an aerodynamic point of view. Especially consider it's like the drag speed relationship is a squared one. But yeah, that's quite easy. But yeah, I think I mean triathlons come a long way in that time as well. I think one thing about triathlon is it's very innovative because the rules
UCI legal's brilliant.
don't restrict anywhere near as much. And I mean, on one hand, that innovation is cool, and I love that, and I love that people can play around with stuff and experiment. And then on the other hand, you see some of these absolutely horrific front ends and bottle combinations, which is good. And I really like and then you see all the sporting bodies update their rules every year, and they have to update it to keep up with the corresponding changes in the year before, which I think is good.
Well, the part that scares us as roadies is because you're having more and more innovation, but the bike handling standard isn't really improving among age groupers. So you see these bizarrely difficult to steer bikes, and we're not putting them in the hands of Pogacar and Van der Poel. We're putting them in the hands of the 48-year-old dentist, and it's like, oh, this could end up bad.
Yeah, there is that, and there is. I think there's quite often a misunderstanding between the trade-off between having a bike that is very fast in a straight line, and then as soon as you have a bit of a crosswind or you have to go around a corner, is unhandleable. So I mean, again, back to trade-offs. That's another trade-off, and that is something that aero doesn't always tell you. But yeah, it's definitely very real. I mean, I actually noticed that with the latest BMC TT bike. They'd really prioritized making a stable bike, and the impact that has on allowing you to ride hard in crosswindy conditions and corners was enormous. I mean, I was doing races and realizing I was a second or two faster than people around me around corners, and that was making, if you're kind of on the red line, being able to not pedal into and out of a corner because you can stay in position and you're faster than everyone. And there's a corner every minute. That's enormous, like absolutely enormous.
Like I came from a track background, and so you look at your video analysis, and if you're 1 centimeter above the black line in pursuit, and like that's costing you, and that's in a 4-kilometer race that you're 1 centimeter away from your perfect apex. If you extrapolate that to your feet away from your apex over a 180-kilometer bike, it ends up being a not insignificant amount of time you've lost.
Really? Yeah. And so, but again, I think our conversation earlier when we started with training was all about, as I think as humans, and we try very hard to kind of simplify and, make things very binary and attach meaning and remove the role of like all the other confounding factors that may come into the picture. And, the dangers of oversimplification are very real sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see you highlighted a lot of people start majoring in the minor things when training and hard work and showing up and being smart around allocation of your time is the majority of endurance sport. It's not the wax chain or the ketones or the tiny minutiae that you see people obsessing about, and it's a marketer's dream as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, endurance training will always be the vast majority about your physiological core aerobic engine, of which the major determinants are your oxygen transport system, probably mostly we think stroke volume ultimately, to how much oxygen can you deliver to your peripheries, and we all know that comes from the volume of training you do. I mean, it's and that is going to be always the main determinant.
There's an interesting, I had the author of Beryl Burton's biography on, and Beryl Burton, one of the most successful female cyclists of all time, some crazy point-to-point records. But they took a mannequin of her and her bike and brought it into the wind tunnel and based it off if she got to not the greatest aerodynamic profile in the world, but a pretty consistent modern day aerodynamic profile. How much faster would these records be? I wonder if you're to do the same with you, if you're to take it into the wind tunnel and figure out one of these new tricked out Remco 0.179 CDA positions, how much faster do those times start to get?
A lot faster. Yeah. The Beryl Burton story is amazing, isn't it?
It's phenomenal.
I yeah, I
So few
wrote
people
about
know about it as well.
yeah, I wrote about her in my book. I interviewed her daughter Denise about it and looked into the records, and I can't remember. Was it 100-mile record that stood for like
Yeah,
30
ridiculous
years
amount
or
of time.
something?
Yeah,
Incredible.
and it's
Basically
still
until
fast if you look at it. Like,
yeah, it's still really fast. And the I've forgotten her name, but the lady that broke it was, full drag to zero, aero
yeah,
optimized, and Beryl had done it on a steel bike, just on a drops, incredible.
it's nuts.
But yeah, that is it's an amazing story, a story that I love. It's obviously very local to me, and just someone who went out and trained hard and loved riding a bike.
Yeah, it feels real Graham Aubrey-esque without maybe the crazy innovation that Aubrey had.
Yeah, I think just a real passion for it, and I think she was a rhubarb farmer, like at
Yeah.
points of her career. So she's just there in picking rhubarb. It's just like the most Yorkshire story you could come across, which is just fantastic,
Bringing rhubarb instead of gels on a ride.
Mm, exactly.
Training's changing so much even like right now. I was looking yesterday. Have you seen these new breathing detection units the Visma Lisa bike are using? It's to check your respiratory rate. So your zones will become this new. I'm gonna reach out and interview. I've already reached out. I'm gonna chat with the founder of the company. So zones will become something fluid based off your RPE that day. So you're not stuck in this static zone anymore where it's like, okay, here's your zone two power. Even if you're on a bad day,
When
your breathing tells the tail that it betrays you. It tells you actually this isn't zone two for you today. So it becomes dynamic zones. So Visma are playing around with them this season, but they seem to be quite cutting edge. Not many teams I'm hearing playing around with that, but almost everyone's starting to play around with heat exposure now.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that. So it's just determining intensity by some breathing metric. Yeah, I haven't
Exactly.
seen
Yes.
it,
So
but yeah.
it's time. Whereas the company TYME, where
Mm.
they're still in beta. I don't think they've launched yet, so it's only
Uh,
the World Tour teams have access to it.
wow. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that. I mean, there is obviously a plethora of ways to measure intensity, isn't there? And there's a massive debate around which of the best of those, which is the most valid. And I guess we're just going to keep seeing different ways of measuring it and prescribing intensity, which is interesting. But yeah, to your point about heat, yeah, I mean, again, going all the way back, I was training for the 2008 Olympic Games, which were really hot, and basically it was like go somewhere hot and get really hot and try and get used to the heat kind of thing, which isn't, I mean, that far off what people do now. I mean, the changes were that the literature came out that said, unsurprisingly, this is a dose response relationship. The more time your body, your core temperature is hot, your body adapts to it. The more adaptation you get, and it's as you said, it's a diminishing returns graph that diminishes off. Seems to be diminish after about 7 to 8 to kind of 10 hours in most people, and after that you get rapidly diminishing returns. But yeah, and then in the last few years, there's been this interesting kind of shift to actually using heat to be a benefit in normal and environmental conditions as a performance benefit, which makes sense. I mean, the biggest adaptation, or at least kind of acute-ish adaptation, is boosting your blood plasma, which obviously is going to improve performance.
Hey everybody, let's take a quick break to talk about the bike I'll be riding this season, Reap. I've been lucky enough to ride all the top brands in the world over the past few years, but these Reap bikes, they're not the same, and I'll tell you why. Reap is the first company I've seen that isn't chasing sales targets and the mass market. They're chasing something very rare, perfection. Every bike they make, it's crafted in the UK factory, and it's not about slapping a Made in Britain label on a bike from a Chinese factory. It's about control. From the first sketch to the final build, they're hands-on, ensuring that every detail is dialed in. That's very rare in an outsourced world of mass production. What sets them apart is innovation. While others pump out the same old designs, Reap's pushing boundaries. They're not following trends, they're setting trends. Think precision and performance, like an F1 car for the road. Absolutely no compromises. And it shows, and you can feel it when you ride the bikes. These bikes are built for riders who demand the best, whether they're chasing podiums or just want a machine that feels like an extension of your body, a piece of art. It's not hype, it's substance. Ride a Reap for yourself and you're riding something crafted with intent. So if you're serious about cycling, check them out. It's reapbikes.com. I absolutely love my one and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Back to the show.
Did you get, taking a little bit of a U-turn here, we've seen all through the pandemic, we've seen this kind of rise in morning routines, and it's like, hey, check out this 4 a.m. morning routine of the world's richest people, and they were by and large a load of bullshit. You know, you take a cold shower, meditate, like it takes you up to lunchtime if you do this morning routine. But I do think there is something powerful in habits, and I chatted with Jaco Lua, physio, a few episodes back, and we were talking about recovery boots, and the science in recovery boots just isn't there. He's like, there's never been any really good, significant sample size, peer-reviewed data to show recovery boots do anything. I was like, why do you still use them? He's like, because if the lads think they work, the placebo is strong, and they do work. And also he touched on something which I thought was super powerful for amateur athletes. He said the idea of an amateur athlete thrown on recovery boots, do they work? Maybe, maybe not. They get a placebo out of it, but you also get this powerful habit stacking. You're unlikely to reach for the takeaway menu and order a Chinese if you have your recovery boots on. You're unlikely to make bad decisions around hydration. You're going to have water instead of a beer. So that habit stacking becomes quite good. But I'm curious to know, is there any habits you picked up later in your career that would have served you earlier in your career?
Well, I think firstly, two philosophies were always been really important for me. One is that we really are the product of our habit and routines. You know, in a sporting sense and in a life sense, and routine is everything. I mean, from a simple point of view, to go to your morning kind of routine, I was never so much into getting up and meditating and drinking green tea and journaling or whatever, or my ice baths. But my routine was, you know, my alarm's going off for a lot of my time, 6:30 on a Monday morning. I'm going swimming. That is my routine. It's my, you know, I'm not giving myself the option of not doing it or not. And so actually a lot of the time I was in automatic mode, because going training 2, 3 or 4 times a day, if you're not in that automatic mode, if you're giving yourself the option of whether you're going or not, it's just too hard and you're not going to do it. So routine is everything. And the second thing is, if you're going to do, as we've discussed, you know, if training is about accumulating as much exercise over a period of time, as much load over a period of time as you can, you do that by making it as easy as possible to accumulate. And that's actually, for me, is not getting up early in the morning. It's making sure you get the rest. It's making sure that it's easy to do. You can do it with friends. You've got kit ready to do it. You've got a nice environment to do it in. You're not trying to make it overly hard. You're trying to actually remove all those barriers to doing it, to make it possible to do it. So I think those two things were really important. But yeah, in terms of routine, I do think the biggest one I would have taken more seriously is nutrition and recovery. And we did it at points. I mean, yeah, we probably starting in 2010, my running coach bought a pint of milk to every hard session that we would have, basically chug after a hard session, which, I mean, is actually pretty good recovery practice, isn't it? You went down Morrison's and bought a bag full of milk, and we had it, and so it was pretty good. But yeah, I would have taken nutrition in training and after training more important, and really had that as part of my routine.
Interesting. What's occupying your time these days? Are you enjoying retirement?
Yeah, I mean, so far I'm loving retirement. I feel like I've been on a long holiday. I'm kind of calling it my gap year. But I, yeah, no, it's been really good. And I mean, as we discussed slightly earlier, I mean, a few things. I mean, a few business things, but also I just feel it's fantastic that like this morning on a sunny morning, I can go out and ride my bike for fun, which there is only a very subtle difference between going out and riding for training and riding for fun, but seems to be quite a big difference for me. So that's fantastic. I'm working on a number of business projects, which all kind of fall for me under this kind of philosophy of anything that helps remove those barriers to people doing more sport. So in the past, that's why I've kind of invested in coaching businesses and various other things, clothing company in Spats, which is all about helping people do exercise in the sport in cold weather, obviously, to keep your hands
It's
and your feet
training.
cold.
It's raining. We're training.
Yeah, everyone. Well, it's such a good slogan, isn't it?
It's brilliant.
And now True Fuels, which is a startup health nutrition business, which is again, I think two things. It's helping people firstly understand the nutrition they need, because yeah, we just look at carbohydrates, for example. My theory is that if people are aiming and are trying to push doing 120 grams an hour, it's not really about the carb you're taking at that point. It's probably because you're not used to taking that amount of carbohydrates, and it's going to cause you a problem when you try to do an Ironman taking that amount of carbohydrates. So I think that kind of educational point of view is really important to me. That innovation by iteration, making great products, and also really simplifying the fueling itself, the fuel, making sure there's nothing in it that doesn't need to be there, and simplifying the process. And yeah, I've been kind of working on it as a project for 6 months now. Our first product, which is a gel that's going to be launched in May, and I've really enjoyed it.
When can I taste it?
May.
Give me an advanced sample.
Yeah, maybe just before May. They're currently being produced, that first the first product, which is a gel, and we're having two versions of the gel, actually, a low and a high salt version, which people will be able to kind of stack together. So you'll be able to have all your carbohydrates and the salt you need for over the event in basically one product, which is cool, an idea. Yeah, and I'm kind of working on the next 5 or 6 products at the moment.
Caffeine or non-caffeine in the gels?
Non-caffeine to start with, because like I said, it's all about access to people, just making it simplifying the fueling process as much as possible. And caffeine, yeah, definitely has a really positive effect for some people, but I think has a net negative for a lot in terms of giving stomach problems and GI distress. And so, eventually I want to get to a point where we will have a way that people who want caffeine can take caffeine, and we can try and educate people of how to train and practice to do that. But the absolute, they're by far the biggest mistake, is that everyone knows here already, and we all still commit this mistake, is you get to your bigger event, whatever it might be, marathon, Ironman, ultra run, sportive, whatever it is, big gravel race, and you start pushing back the nutrition that you've never tried before because your mate told you it's the best thing to do, and you get stomach problems, and it ends your race. So that's the kind of the big problem I'm trying to solve.
I've got a request.
So,
bring out a caffeine chewing gum.
They already exist, don't they?
They do exist. They're really hard to get though, and there's never any sport-specific ones. At least they're very difficult to get over here in Ireland.
Oh, cool. That's good. Yeah, why specifically chewing gum for you?
Slower release than just getting the big bang of caffeine all in one go. And if you're on a long road race or triathlon, you're like, I don't want all my caffeine tied to my gels all the time. It's like, and you're rooting in your pocket, and it's just not realistic to go, I'm rooting in my pocket on a pouring rainy day, and you have a GABA on or something. You're like, did I put my caffeinated and my non-caffeinated gels? And it's like a crosswind. You've no hands on the bars, bumping shoulders of people. You're pulling out any gel you can take at the moment the racing dies, and it's like, oh shit, I took my caffeine one, and I've eaten all my caffeine ones in the first 2 hours, and I've no caffeinated ones for the finish. The chewing gum, it's more reliable. And also gives you the choice of, you can get your carbs through solid food earlier in the race, and you can still have caffeine earlier in the race as well, where there's no solid foods that seem to be paired with caffeine. If you're having rice cakes and bits like that in your pockets, you're totally caffeineless at the start of the race, which is, a period where the break could be going, and it's a messy time as well.
I like that. And yeah, I've been a bit uncomfortable including it in gels for exactly that reason, because sometimes you want a gel and you don't want the caffeine, and sometimes you want the caffeine and you want the gel. But it seems crazy that you'd always want them at the same time. So then you think, well,
they're two different problems, I guess.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and then you're thinking, well, actually, what vector is the best way to deliver that in the simplest possible way? Because you're absolutely right. I've been in that position too many times, whether it's racing or on the local club run, actually, banging through Yorkshire in January, and you really don't want to take your hands away from the drops because there's potholes everywhere and there's crosswinds and there's people riding, and so simplifying that fueling process is really important. And I think chewing gum is a good vector. But yeah, one of the things I absolutely kind of love these discussions, and I've worked really hard on like surveying consumers. We have a big group of co-creators that has helped me developing products that I send a survey out to every week, which is really cool, and rewarding them obviously with free products and stuff. And so actually thinking about not only surveying people to understand what the market need is, because there's one kind of specific need for me, it's probably different to most people, so kind of going through that process of consultation is really interesting, but also actually thinking about creating a real brand that really is just about people, community, and working out ways to make people's exercising more effective and lives more healthily, and building that kind of brand from the ground up. I've really enjoyed that.
Because the needs of athletes are definitely different than, we're often fit. Like the one that sticks out to me, and it's not an athletic product, but it's just, I was thinking about it when you were talking about separating the carbs from the caffeine, because they're two different things. Either I want to be alert or I want fueling. Like I was in my local shop the other day and I was like, I had a podcast coming up. I was tired. I was like, okay, screw the gut microbiome. I'm going to have a caffeinated drink. They didn't have any Red Bull. I got a can of Monster, and it's like, I don't know, it's 500 or 600 mils for a can of Monster. I was like, well, there's two different problems here. The problem I'm trying to solve is I want to be more alert. The problems they're trying to solve are, here's 600 mils of fluid for hydration, and it's paired with alertness. You almost want your alertness in like a shot, because I don't want to be hydrated at that time, because I don't want to start pissing through a 2-hour podcast. It's like, now I have to have 600 mil that's paired with my caffeine. And sure enough, towards the end of the podcast, I'm just absolutely dying to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, and I think that's the key when you start off with a product. The first process of the kind of consultation is to try and work out exactly what problem you're trying to solve with this, with the product, and then from there, you come up with the specific ideas to the problem you're trying to solve, and then go out and kind of consult again and say, well, actually, does this solve your problem or this problem A, B, or C, and then try and create it from there, which is good. I mean, because some of the things that I've expected, you come back with almost completely different things. Sometimes you consult and you don't get an answer either, because everyone's different and you're not going to solve everyone's particular challenges. But I think that you've brought a good point about nutrition products that help alertness, performance, kind of outside the sport, or actually without a need for fluid and carbs. Actually that does cross over into sports, so you get up and you need something just to help you get through a particular session or something after work or whatever it might be. I think that's another really interesting kind of
like a
problem that's happening.
Like if you go to the gym, you bang a little pre-workout with 50 ml of fluid and you're ready to go, but we don't have an equivalent pre-workout for a bike ride.
True. I know. I've been thinking about that.
We'll come back for part 2 of Business Wars.
Exactly.
One of the greatest athletes of all time, Alistair Brownlee. Thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thanks very much.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.